You're watching the estate planning series, Don't Sell Grandmama's House, with Olivia Smith, co-founder of the SR Law Group.
So hello, everyone. I am seeing Miss Olivia right now.
You see me?
Yeah. Can y'all see me? As the
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, my name is Tisha Mitchell-Curry, and we are so pleased that you are with us today, where we are going to be talking about Don't Sell Grandmama's House, the next installment of our estate planning series. We've got a lot of information for you. We hope that we glean something. This will be a high-level overview of what we know about this business. We have plenty of time for you to ask us questions. We're going to have you hold on to those until the end, so that we can have those questions answered for you in the Q&A. But right now, what we're going to start with is, can y'all see my screen?
No, I just see you talking.
All right, let me get my screen sharing. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right, hold on. I got a screen share. Give me 1 second.
I got people texting me, trying to get in. Now we see your screen.
Awesome. Let's see. And I cannot move my screen.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's try this now. Can you see me now? Can you see the whole?
I think we got it. I can see you and I can see your screen.
Fantastic.
It's not in present mode though.
Okay,
Slideshow mode. Now, yes.
We're in business. Awesome. Thank you so much. Sometimes technology just will not allow us to be great. All right. Thank you so much. As I said, my name is Tisha Curry, and I am going to introduce to you our fantastic gerontologist, Miss Gina McKnight. Gina McKnight is a committed, service-oriented professional who has aligned both her direct patient care, personal life experiences, as well as professional business experiences into a company that serves aging adults and their loved ones through their golden years, graceful living. Through her caregiver training, advocacy, and education on senior resources, Ms. McKnight aims to empower care partners with the tools that they need to bridge the gap in healthcare services. Her client's approach is focused on one goal: to improve or maintain an individual's quality of life so they're able to age gracefully with both dignity and comfort. Respectively, Graceful Living's core values are to serve first with compassion, respect, and gratitude. In addition to caregiver and advocacy, Ms. McKnight has worked in the field of advertising and marketing, business development for corporations such as Essence and Ebony Magazines, Universal Health Services, and WellStar Health Systems. She has earned a Master's of Science in Applied Gerontology from Brenau University and a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and Mass Communications from the University of South Carolina, and has been a licensed realtor since 2006. She currently resides in East Point, where she serves as the Vice Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission Board, as well as an active member of Kiwanis Club of South Cobb. In her spare time, she enjoys expressing her creativity through music and the arts, along with spending time with friends, family, and her fur baby, Chewy. Miss McKnight.
Hello. Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tisha, for the introduction. What I would like to do is introduce to everyone another panelist, Miss Olivia Smith. Olivia, she is a Georgia native and a graduate of Spelman College, where she has received her Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. She is also a graduate of Loyola University New Orleans College of Law. Olivia has been practicing law for 14 years, starting out in criminal defense, but transitioned into estate planning, elder law, and probate as a result of a personal family experience as well. She is the owner and partner of SR Law Group, a boutique law firm that focuses on estate planning, elder law, and probate in the Black community. She is also co-host of Black Parents Aging, a podcast that helps children of aging parents navigate the changing landscape. Olivia is very active and engaged in her church and community, and she also serves as the Probate and Estates Chair for the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys and on the advisory board of Changing How Individuals Prosper. Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia Smith.
Thank you. And I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Tisha Curry, who is going to be our presenter tonight. Tisha began her real estate career in new home sales and has expanded her business to focus on assisting home sellers. Tisha has made a high-level commitment to her real estate education, having been mentored and coached by several of the most highly acclaimed real estate coaches in the industry. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Sociology from Western Michigan University, a Master of Science degree in Administration from Central Michigan University, and a Master of Science degree in Real Estate from Georgia State University. This multi-million-dollar sales agent is a certified new home sales professional and holds the military relocation professional designation. Tisha is a past member of the Douglas County Board of Tax Assessors. She is a real estate coach to top producing realtors and teaches real estate principles at Georgia State University, Robinson College of Business. Tisha has a special interest in military families. She is certified as a peer mentor with Wounded Warrior Project and volunteered as an instructor with the Army Community Service Program. In her spare time, she enjoys entertaining at home with friends, live music, line dancing, and traveling. Tisha is a former teenage mom who believes through faith and hard work, the only limit to your potential is your own limiting beliefs. So, Miss Tisha Curry, and before I give the floor to you, I just want to say, as you listen to her present, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. I'll be keeping track of what the questions in the chat to make sure that she has the opportunity to answer all of them.
Thank you, Ms. Olivia. So I want to first by saying this is a lot of material, and there is no way that in 1 hour's time we'll be able to cover all of it. This is intended to be a high-level overview of what's possible and some considerations when you have inherited real estate. And we want you to think about potentially using that real estate to build wealth, okay? So here's some ways that we talked about ways to build wealth through inherited real estate. The first thing we want to do is talk about understanding it, right? We're going to talk about the definition of it, what the ownership rights are. We'll talk a little bit about the probate process and considerations when you have inherited real estate or if you are planning to leave real estate to your heirs. So the definition of inherited real estate, it refers to property that has been passed on from an individual, typically through a will or trust. If you've been through our estate planning series throughout, we've talked at length about establishing a will or trust so that property stays in the family once a loved one passes away. So once you've inherited that property, you then become the legal owner of that property and you get the opportunity to do with it as you choose. We talk about ownership rights, right? We just talked about you become the legal owner and you have the right to use that property. You have the right to sell that property, or you can choose to rent it out. It is up to you. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find the best way to move this so that I can see everything. All right. Thank you so much. The probate process can be lengthy and it can be very expensive. Inheriting real estate can come with its own unique set of challenges and complexities. Just last week, I got a phone call from someone whose loved one had passed away. She had some questions about how that property was titled. So before she could even make any decisions about what she was going to do with that property, we had to get to who's the actual owner now that that loved one has passed away. If there was planning in place prior to that loved one dying, it could be a fairly simple process. If that plan was not in place, it can be lengthy, expensive, tedious. So we want to just kind of see where we are in the process once we learn about this inherited property. There's some considerations. What I am going to tell you is that I am a realtor, a real estate agent. I am not an attorney, and I am not a tax professional, and I am not a financial advisor. Those folks should be on your team, and they need to be looking at this situation in its entirety, okay? You want to make sure, and one of the reasons why we're having this series is so that you're planning ahead. But if you don't, you want to understand what are the tax implications, what are the legal implications, what are the financial implications on any decision that you make with regard to this inherited property. You want to fully understand your rights and also your obligations as the inherited real estate owner. And also, once you've inherited property, what does that mean for other stakeholders in your life, for your spouse, for your children, for your siblings? We've got to take all of that into consideration. Before we can even make a decision about what to do with the property, we've got to iron all of that stuff out. So you have some opportunities with long-term wealth with regard to inherited real estate. It can be seen as an investment. You want to talk about prioritizing profits over emotions. And we're going to also talk about what those considerations are as well. So when we think about it from an investment perspective, inherited real estate is a valuable asset, especially in some areas of the United States. And it can be an effective way to build long-term wealth. It can happen through using it as a rental, perhaps as an Airbnb. Perhaps you've got some land that can be used as a farm, or that you are maybe fostering some lumber. There's a bunch of different things that can happen with a property that you have inherited. It really just kind of depends on where the property is located, what the zoning laws are in that respect, what is the highest and best use of that property. There's a bunch of considerations, right? By following the right strategies, you can maximize your profit and grow your wealth over time. So one of the things that we talk about often with real estate is about location, location, location. But we also take into consideration zoning. We also take in consideration how the property can be used. Do you have a duplex? Do you have a single family? How many bedrooms do you have? What is the proximity to schools? What is the proximity to highways? What else is near? All of those things really factor in how you can use this property for an investment. We want to talk about prioritizing your profits over your emotions. Sometimes when you get an inherited property, perhaps it was where your family had family reunions. Perhaps it was where you grew up. Perhaps it's where a family member is currently living. Perhaps you inherited a property across the United States and you may be making some considerations about, do you want to move back into it, right? So oftentimes when we inherit property, there is an emotional aspect to us making decisions. But we really want to think about this from an investment standpoint. What makes the most logical sense, right? Not only with the property itself, but what's happening logically in the market. What's also happening with the economy. What's happening with what's going on around the property. All of those things are considerations that we need to be thinking about from a logical standpoint. You also want to keep ongoing communications with your professionals, your team, your estate attorney, with your probate attorney, with your real estate attorney, with your real estate agent, with your financial planner, with your siblings, or anybody else who's involved that might be helping with the decision making. In order for you to achieve your desired end, all of those factors need to be taken into consideration. So while there might be some challenges in managing an inherited property for reasons that we just talked about, could be location, proximity, could be condition, it could be who's going to handle this financial obligation while we're getting through this process, the property may still be valuable even after all of those considerations, right? You want to think about this from a longer term perspective. We might be in a bind right now because we're in 6 months and something just happened and we didn't have a plan in place. But what are the considerations over 10 years? What are the considerations over 20 years? What is the consideration if you have grandchildren who are going to be going to college and you would like to maybe leverage that property to help offset some of those costs? What is the consideration about what is your age now? Could this be a property that you could use to supplement your income into retirement? Also, if you know that maybe you have a health issue, is there a way to put this property into a trust so that you are able to leverage the property for government benefits in the future? There are a bunch of considerations you want to think about when you're thinking about building this long-term wealth. And sometimes it's not necessarily how much is this property going to cash flow, but having a property in your possession may offset some tax consequences. So you want to be able to have that conversation as well. We just talked about the tax implications, right? When we talk about estate taxes, inherited real estate is typically not subject to federal estate taxes, but depending on the state you live in, you may be subject to estate inheritance tax. It just depends on how the property was left to you. You also have the implication for rental income. If you choose to rent the property out, depending on where you live, that rental income may be subject to income taxes. But the flip side of that is that some of those expenses with regard to the property, like taxes, repairs, even having to physically go to the property, can be a tax write-off for you. And again, I will tell you to have a conversation with your tax professional really to maximize the property. And then also finally, if you decide you're going to sell the inherited property, you may be subject to capital gains taxes depending on how that property was left to you. If the property has appreciated in value since the date of the death, that kind of spread between when you took possession of the property and actually when you dispose of that property may subject you to some taxes that maybe you were not aware of. Okay? So when we decide that we've got this property and we're not exactly sure what we want to do with it, we think about, let's evaluate what's really going on with the property. I just had a tenant move out of one of my rentals and I said, this is absolutely fantastic, right? So no, we're not getting any rental income, but what it does allow me to do is I can now get a home inspector in there to tell me exactly what's going on with that property. Do we need to make some improvements? Do we have some things that are going bad? We also are going to have an appraiser go over there to say, okay, now this property is vacant, go over there and tell us exactly what this property is worth in the condition that it's in right now. The subsequent conversation to that is, if we make certain improvements, how will that impact the value of the property and is it worth it? And that all is going to be determined by what is it that you intend to do. If we're going to sell it, we're going to make one decision. If we're going to rent it out, we may make a different decision. And that's to a longer term tenant. If we decide that we're going to make it into an Airbnb, that's yet a different consideration. Depending on what your strategy is or what your long-term goal is, that's going to determine what you do next. We've already had the conversation about location. What is proximity to schools? Who would want to live in this property? Why would they want to live in this property? Based on who might want to live here, what does this property look like in comparison to their other choices? Are there other homes in the neighborhood? Are there things that are going on around that might be newer or better, or provide better amenities or walkability, or that are safer for someone? You have to not just think about the property from the perspective of your property itself, but we're also considering what else is happening around it. So there's some risks and some benefits associated with inherited real estate. And we probably touched on some of those, but we're gonna address them further here. So here's the benefit. You get the opportunity to generate passive income that has potential tax benefits and potential property value appreciation. So these are all the things that can go great if you decide that you are going to hold on to this property. But there's also some drawbacks, and let's talk about those. There's some risks. There's maintenance and repair expenses. One of the reasons why you might want to have a home inspector is you want to see how much is it going to cost? How old is this roof? Will it need to be repaired soon? How old is this furnace? Is it going to go out at any time? Is this property functionally obsolete? Is it a 2-bedroom, 1 bath? And most of the homes around it are now 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. How would you find your quality tenants, right? So if your house is in a neighborhood where there's some beautiful older homes and your neighbors across the street, are maybe unsavory, you need to consider that. And then what is the potential for a market downturn? So we've had a lot of conversation about interest rates, market downturns. Where are people going to work? Is this property near an agency that's scheduled to close soon? We saw a lot of that when we saw military bases closing. So we had a lot of people that would say, hey, I'm going to hold this property because we got a military base closed and we'll just rent it to soldiers as they come in and out. Well, if the government makes a decision that we're going to close a base, how does that impact your long term with regard to what you were thinking about this property? That's just one example. There are many, many things to think about. So when we think about it, are we going to hold this property or are we going to decide to sell? So what do we need to consider when we're thinking about that? Hold. If the property has sentimental value, you could generate some rental income as a source of cash flow, or you might plan to move into it in the future. So let's say you've got a family property that maybe is a little bit further out and you don't necessarily want to live there now because it's not close proximity to where you work. But maybe you've decided that it's close to a lake or a beach or it's close to family, and you might want to move back into that property when you retire. Or perhaps the property is close to a college town and you want to hold it so that your grandkids, when they go off to college or your kids go off to college, they have a place to stay. You want to be thinking about if the property has some sentimental value, or there are ways that you can generate income, or you use it as a tax shelter, or maybe that's the place where the family gathers for family reunions. You might want to consider holding the property. On the flip side, you may decide I want to sell. I need my cash. I don't want to deal with the maintenance. I don't want to deal with finding a tenant. I don't want to deal with the responsibility that comes with it. I know that this plant is getting ready to shut down in the next 2 years, and I don't want to be stuck holding this property. Or we've had a home inspection now and we know that there's going to be some major expenses that come up with this property that we're going to have to consider. And it's just not worth it for me to do the repairs. It's not worth it for me to do the work. Just kind of decide for yourself. When you're deciding you're going to buy or hold, you're going to take consideration of all of those things. One other thing, a lot of people say, I don't want to keep the property because I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to be responsible for tenants and toilets. And I don't want to be finding somebody to come into the property. And I don't really want to do this. So we've had this saying that I've heard in one of the investors groups, and they've said, if you can't put your mama out your house on Christmas Day, it's not likely you should be a landlord. Now that seems kind of harsh, right? Here's what you have to think about. Either your tenants are paying for your property or you are paying for another family to live free. You're going to have to make a decision when you think about it from that respect, is where do you want to be? So you have a couple options. You can choose to manage it yourself. You can self-manage the property, but it's going to require some time and some work. Perhaps there's a contractor or a handyman and you can leave you with added stress. I have a neighbor right now that she has a whole portfolio of property that's in California, and she manages those properties from her kitchen table in Georgia. Now she goes to California often to see what's going on, but she's got a very wonderful handyman that lives across the street. But every time she goes back to California and she's looking at those properties and she's paying attention to what's happening with that, usually 3 or 4 times a year, she's able to write that off as a tax deduction because she's actually going to take care of her business. So she's a real estate agent, though. She's got a little bit more experience, and those properties have been in her family for 40 years. Not everyone has that same experience, and you don't have to. There are other options, and let's talk about what those are. You can hire a property manager. A property manager generally in Georgia is a licensed broker of some sort. They have some sort of fiscal responsibility to the government, and you pay them a certain fee of your rent to take care of the property. They can do things with tenant screening and upkeep. A lot of property managers have a list of maintenance people and contractors that they use when something goes wrong. You can have an agreement with that property manager that they can make a decision up to a certain dollar amount, but anything above that, they need to have a conversation with you about, right? This can create a more stable cash flow for you because this property manager does this all the time, and they generally have some systems and some relationships in place. So you get to trade your time, right, for their knowledge, but it's going to cost you. So consider that. The other thing you can do is a combination of both. You can decide, listen, I don't want you to be doing my long-term property management, but when someone moves out, I'll pay you a fee to help me secure a tenant. Or if I have a major issue, I'll pay you a fee for referrals. So you get to do this as a hybrid as well. You can do some of it yourself, and you can hire out some of the things that you're not as comfortable or familiar with. And you can do a combination of the both of those things. So now we're at the Q&A session. We've gone over a lot of information. We've gone over it quickly. We've got our gerontologist with us, and we've got our estate planner with us as well. And we are here to answer questions. If you all are interested, here's our contact information. I'm going to stop sharing this in a minute, but the information is available to you. If you'd like for us to share these slides with you, you can. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Do we have some questions, Miss Olivia?
I don't have any in the chat, but maybe there are questions that just have not been expressed yet. Oh, wait. Question. For those contemplating getting started in property investment, can you please recommend resources and/or local investment groups?
Absolutely. There are several. One of them that I would encourage you to, there are a couple of local investor groups. Fortunately for the internet, we also have some that you can join virtually. But one of them is the Georgia Association of Real Estate Investors. It's called Georgia REIA. And the other one is called the Atlanta Association of Real Estate Investors, and that's called AREA. And you can Google both of those, as well as you can chat with a local real estate agent who is investor friendly, and they can also get you connected with small groups. I can help you get started with sending you in the right direction if you're looking for education. There's also a series of books that I would encourage you to consider. One of them is the Millionaire Real Estate Investor book, provided by Gary Keller. There was one written called Flip, and there's another one written called Hold, H-O-L-D. Those 3 books really are a good resource that allows you to start asking maybe some questions and maybe thinking about things that you need to put in place. One of the things I want to tell you, though, is that if you're thinking about using inherited property, you might want to start thinking about that now. You want to start having family conversations about what are we doing? We have some property amongst us that are, involved in our family, and let's talk about a family plan for how it is that we are going to maximize this investment.
Those are really good points. Tisha, did you say you were going to stop sharing?
I can stop sharing. Let me stop sharing.
Okay. Another question is, what exactly is probate, and as it relates to your property, and what do we need to do on the front end if we intend to leave our property to our children? I guess go ahead. Yeah, I will take this. So probate, broken down in the simplest form, is the process of getting assets out of the name of someone who is deceased and in the name of someone who is still living. In Georgia, that requires a court process to do that. And so if you have a will, and I want to say this because a lot of people don't understand that, if you have a will, that means that it has to go through probate. For people that want to avoid court in that process, they often look at trust planning as an option. And then the second part of the question was, what do we need to do on the front end if we intend to leave our property to our children? I think you need to be really clear on a couple of things. Does you say children as a collective? So I'm guessing you were saying all of your children. Does all of your children want your property? Do your children get along with each other? What ultimately is the goal of leaving it with your children? Is it because you want that home to stay in the family for, years and generations? And if so, are you leaving money for it to be maintained? How is it going to be maintained? And then the other point is, if all of your children aren't interested in it, it may not make sense to leave it to all of them. And so part of the front end work is making sure you're having those tough conversations with yourself and with your kids to really gauge their interests and to figure out for yourself, like, what is the goal? What is the goal for the assets that you have? And then making sure that you have a plan and that you have a plan in place that's actually going to achieve the goal that you've set out to achieve. Any other questions? We love questions. I have a question, Miss Tisha. Yes. So, and then this is, I guess, a more of an experience question. So I was perusing the tax sale list for Douglas County that's coming up first week in June to just kind of see what was available. And there were so many properties that were owned by estates, that they were probate properties. And I guess my question to you is, how often do you see, even if people want to sell, families winding up having to sell maybe for less than they could have sold if they'd planned, because it's now in a tax sale, or they haven't really thought through what they wanted to happen to the property? How often do you see properties and maybe investors buying properties for less than what they probably could have gotten if they'd have planned a little better?
So the whole point of being a real estate investor is that you buy it for less than market value, and you maximize that, right? So investors invest in real estate generally when there's an opportunity to improve value. Okay, so when we think about tax sales or tax planning, the county is not in the business of holding real estate property, just period. County taxes, the county forecloses on your property for taxes. Their intention is not to take your property. Their intention is to get their money. And so if they have to sell your property to get their money, that's what they want to do. They're not going to sell that property generally for its market value. They're going to sell that property to satisfy their tax lien, period. Okay? So with that being said, knowing that the county's job is not to get you the most money, knowing that their job is only to recoup their costs, we see this happening often, right? Even if a house sells, I've seen it. We had a situation where we bought a condo where the seller hadn't paid the taxes, right? We thought at closing that the closing attorney was supposed to pay the taxes, which they probably did. And next thing you know, we get a letter from some folks saying, hey, we bought this tax lien from the tax sale. So we had a couple of options. We could pay those people what was the balance due on the taxes, which was a couple $1,000s, or we could allow them to put a lien on our property and charge us interest, right? And we'd have to pay them later. We just made a business decision at that time. Let's go ahead and pay these folks off, get rid of this lien so that we can move forward. What we need to understand is when anytime property changes hands, all liens need to be satisfied. So if you sell a property for $100,000, but there's a $25,000 tax lien because nobody's paid taxes in years, you're only going to get $75,000 because the proceeds of that, and that's if there's not a mortgage, right? The proceeds of that have to go pay the taxes. And here's one thing I need us to all be clear about is taxes trump everything else. Okay? Taxes come before the mortgage. That's the reason why most mortgage companies will put your tax payment in escrow, because they know that if there's a tax lien, it could wipe out the mortgage that you owe them. Taxes is the quickest way to lose your property. It kind of depends on how aggressive that municipality is with getting those tax liens in place. That's one thing. But there's also some law in place that you have a right to redeem your property. So if I go buy your property based on a tax sale, there's some things that I've got to do to get that cloud cleared, the title cleared, before I can actually take possession. It's a little bit more sophisticated and something that more sophisticated investors use. But where there's a great risk, there's also a great reward. And that's the reason why they do it. Did that answer your question, Olivia?
It did. And we have a few other questions that have popped up. Let me go back up. As a new investor, who do I need or my team and on my team, and how much money should I have available?
That's one of those. It depends.
It depends. Well, it depends, of course.
The generic answer, right? But it really just depends. It depends on where you're going to start investing, right? I had a gentleman tell me if he lost all his money and he only had a few $1,000s, what he would do is he would go down to the courthouse steps with his little bit of money. He would go to the inner city and he would buy properties on the courthouse step.
Why are you going to the inner city? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, because
Sorry, I've digressed.
It could be the country. It doesn't matter. I'm just telling you what he said, right? He's like, man, I go buy those houses in Detroit for like $10,000 on the courthouse steps, and then I put a little money in them, I sell them for $30,000, and I will rent and repeat. So when I say it depends on your market. It depends on what's available. It depends on if you have access to credit. It depends on if you're going to be the person that's going to be willing to fix it up. It depends on if you want to buy it and you just want to do broom sweep cleaning. It depends on whether you're going to take a trashy house and, make it beautiful. The second investment property I ever purchased, I bought it from HUD as a HUD foreclosure. And the day I bought that property, I went into the basement and I cried like a baby. Because the house needed so much work that at that point I didn't really have the experience to be able to make it work. But what I did have was a mentor who was guiding me through the process. So I didn't buy that property on my own strength. I bought that property on the trust that who I was in relationship with helped me get through the process. So
and
again, they did, and I still have that property to this day. Good. But so, it depends. Do you have a partner? Do you have someone who's more experienced? What is the condition of the property? Where are you getting it? How are you acquiring it? Do you have access to credit? Do you have, money saved? Do you have money in a 401k? Does your partner have money? What's your experience? It really just depends. If you don't have any money, you can start real estate investing as a wholesaler. And all you're doing is, tying up the property and you're finding somebody else that can buy it from you. It doesn't take money for that. You have time. So that's kind of a lengthy, answer to a complicated question, but it really just depends. Who should you have on the team? So we've talked about contractors, a mentor, a business partner if necessary, an attorney, a financial planner. You don't have to have all of those people in place, but start with someone who knows who else you need. Just take the first step and someone will meet you there.
Next question. How do you go about trust planning? You need to contact an attorney. That is one of those, do not try this at home. There is no way that you can draft a trust on your own if you do not have a legal background. It's just not going to go well. So my information is right here. But if you know another attorney that does estate planning, reach out to them. But that is definitely something you need an attorney to do. And okay, any other questions? I don't see any others in the chat. Did I miss any?
Virginia, did you have
No, I thought I saw something in the chat, but it's not there. I do want to chime in on the considerations when it comes to family property, just because, I actually am the property manager for my family's rental property that's in another state. And I want people from a healthcare perspective, I don't think too many people think about this. One of the reasons why we chose to hold on to the property long term is because both my grandmother and my dad were diagnosed with dementia. In order to pay for care and the expenses that comes along with it, the need for that cash flow every month was necessary. Not too many people think about the expense of that. I'll leave this as an example. My grandmother, when it was over 10 years ago when she was initially diagnosed and we needed help in the home. At that time, an agency rate was only, give or take, $18, maybe $20 an hour. Fast forward to now, 10 years later, it's upwards of $30 to $35 an hour. Fortunately, we have the real estate still in the family where, although that inflation in the rate for the care, that cost of care went up, so has our rental rates, and we still have that income. So, but if we had sold that property over 10 years ago, my grandmother lived until she was 94. Whatever she had saved up was gone way before then, right? So, and if we had sold the property, that would have been gone within 2 years. So fortunately, we still have the rental property where the income can cover the cost. So if you think about full-time care for your family member, let's just say full-time, 5 days out of the week, it's upwards on the low end, maybe $3,500, but it can be more. And that's someone who's actually coming into the home. If you have assisted living, if you choose a personal care home as a stay, that expense is even higher. So sometimes when you think about when you want to consider whether or not to hold or to sell, I know many of my friends often ask, why are you even doing this? And I just know the expense for healthcare, and I just know that cash, it's great when you get it initially, but it runs out. It goes very quickly. So just something to consider whenever you're thinking about, should I hold, should I sell grandma's house? You have to consider that long-term planning.
Now that's a great point.
I want to chime in and say, and I hadn't even thought about that till you just brought it up, right? We talked about don't sell grandma's house as a way to building wealth, but don't sell grandma's house as a way to not go broke as well.
Right.
So it's not about can we grow it, but can grandma's dementia not drag the whole family down into a hole because we're already trying to put money in to make it work, right? And then it also comes down to whether or not grandma can get the best care available, or can she get only what she can afford. So it really is twofold. And it's pretty amazing that real estate is able to really be on both sides of that coin, right? So oftentimes we think about, has it appreciated? We don't think about the cash flow and also the offset of expenses that real estate can kind of buffer. So
absolutely. And I'll just use it as an example, just for one home. I hope my mom isn't on the phone. She might feel like, why are you talking about business? But I'll just share just on how rental rates have increased.
Trying to save lives.
I know, right? But I think people need to, think about this. Like one of the homes, we were renting for maybe $600. Now, fast forward, can easily get $2,600. That's a significant amount in cash flow. Of course, it came with some investment, but that investment, because it's in an LLC, it's that business expense. It's not their personal expenses that they actually have. So when we ever get to that point to sell, it'll be covered with whoever that new, owner of the property would be. So it's just definitely something to consider whenever you're thinking about your long-term care planning. Not everyone has 401k, a significant savings account, long-term care insurance. These are some things that, a different generation, they weren't privy to, probably wasn't educated on it when it comes to that financial planning. Speaking of my family, my family chose real estate as their investment vehicle, more than anything else. So it's just, it's one of those things.
Good for you. Good for your family, because what I notice on the estate planning and the probate side is most of the times the most valuable asset is the home. Like that is a generation where the American dream was owning your piece of dirt. And so most of the time that is the biggest investment. And so that's the biggest asset. So we want to make sure we're really preserving that. I see some questions. When property is inherited, what other factors need to be considered in determining whether to sell or hold on to the property as a rental? In other words, how do you determine which is better?
So I'm getting ready to say.
Right.
It depends.
Right. It really kind of depends on your family situation. What is it that you're trying to accomplish, and what resources do you have in place right now? So Legina just gave you some examples of, no, we weren't looking at, selling the property for this long-term gain. We were looking at this property offsetting some long-term care. That's one thing, right? And do you have someone in the family in this inherited property where can you float? Is there someone there that can, if some improvements need to happen, can that happen? I just told you about a property that we have vacant. Well, that tenant's lease wasn't up, but she decided to leave, right? That means that I always have to have in my mind that a tenant's going to leave. And I have to have some money set aside to continue to pay those expenses while we're either going to fix the property up, get another tenant, sell it, reposition it from, a regular long-term rental to a corporate rental or to an Airbnb. So the great thing about it is when a tenant leaves, because I expect that's going to happen and I live accordingly, I'm also still able to work. So I don't need that cash flow right now. That cash flow can stay in the business for something later, right? So it really just kind of depends on what your family situation is and what your intent. What I'll be very clear with you about is that I bought those properties in my 30s so that it would cash flow for me when I retired. I'm 52 now, right? So the property's almost paid off, but I'm still not in retirement. But I do have 2 grandchildren that will eventually be going to college. My intention as a real estate investor that I would be the last one in my bloodline that would have to pay for student loans. That's some forward thinking. So when a tenant gets on my nerves or they don't pay or we got a bill, I have to keep in my mind, I bought this for and I bought this from my grandkids' college. So this little aggravation I have right now is small compared to what I'm trying to do, right? So when you think about what are the things that you are considering, it really just depends on what is your end goal. And that can change. That can change over time, right? One of the things that happened is that in our family, cash flow wise, we got to retirement a little bit sooner. Well, now we can use money to travel. We don't need it, so that wasn't the intention when we bought it, but things shift over time. Who knows? I may get sick and I might need long-term care. My mother may happen and I might need to move her into the property from Michigan. You just never know what your family situation is. You just have to be able to, or be prepared to pivot, whatever that is. You have to look at what your resources are, what your intent is, and what do you have in place to weather the storm when it goes wrong, because something is going to go wrong. What's your plan? And so what it changes from a minor inconvenience, the tenant moving out, to being an emergency because I don't have money to pay that mortgage. You've got to have a plan in place when that happens.
And I'll just add to that, especially when property is inherited, you want to look at, okay, what is this heir's property? Are there 10 other people on this property with me? And if there are, how can I reduce the number of owners? Can I buy some of these people out if I want to, keep the property to do some of those things that Tisha said? Because, you may have really good ideas, but if you don't own that property alone, it's a matter of trying to convince or, coming to some sort of compromise or agreement with the other owners as to how you're going to move forward.
And Olivia, I'm glad you brought that up too, about the heirs property, because isn't there a way to where you could actually, I know people tend to want to leave it to, they want to be able to leave the property to their children. And I think when they say that, they're thinking of the value and they split it in some kind of way, not so much of leaving the actual property. So there's a way that trust can be written where it can still just be that one person who is business minded to manage everything, and their responsibility is to follow the orders of that trust so it can be split equally if it were to ever sell. So I think, a lot of people may not think about that. So
if the house is left in the trust is the owner of the house. And so if it's for the benefit of your kids, they would be the beneficiary. So if the house is being rented, there's a, rent, maybe they get some sort of distribution quarterly or, bi-yearly or yearly. And so you're not in a situation where you have 3 or 4 or 5 people owning a property trying to figure it out. The trust owns it. And, that trustee is the one that's making sure everything is continuing. Right. And the kids are just beneficiaries. They just get their check in the mail, but they, you don't have to worry about them kind of fighting over what to do. There is one other question I see. If I sell the house, how do you justify the capital gains? So I can tell you, and then Tisha, I don't know if you have your own experience. I can tell you that there is a benefit to inheriting a house or inheriting property versus just, grandma putting your name on the deed. And the benefit to inheriting is a step up in basis when you look at capital gains taxes. And so that's how I justify it. If it is a house that you inherited, you received a step up in basis. And so when you sell it, ideally, you would have very little or no capital gains tax to pay. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add on that.
I will add.
Okay.
I am not a tax professional.
Right. I am not.
Ditto. What she said. But that is the little bit I know, because I do have clients come in and they're just like, well, can I just put my kid on it now while I'm still alive? And that is something that is a possibility, but you have to look at the consequences, the benefits and the setbacks to doing that versus, you know, your child or grandchild inheriting that property once you pass away. So you need to weigh the options to see what would make the most sense. Okay, I don't understand when you say the trust owns it, but who then manages it all? So when you set up a trust, you retitle your assets. So your house right now, Tisha's house right now is in Tisha Curry. Her name is on the deed. When she sets up a trust and she wants to put her home in the trust, the name on the deed would be changed. We would redeed the property, and it no longer has Tisha Curry as the owner of the property. The owner of the property would be the living trust, the revocable living trust of Tisha Curry. So that is the entity that then owns the property. Does that make sense? And the trustees, you would list, okay, while you're alive, you're the trustee, right? So you kind of manage the trust however you see fit. Once you pass away or become incapacitated, you would have listed who is your successor trustee, who steps in after you and follows the list of instructions that you have left that person as to how you want the assets in the trust managed. And so that is how that works. I hope that makes sense.
It doesn't, but I'm going to call you.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that this is a reiteration of the point that this is a high level conversation and the nuances will require another conversation afterwards.
Like lots of conversations, yes.
Lots of conversations. And again, it starts with it depends, right? One of the things I do want to remind you all, and I don't think I said it when we started, there is a survey in the chat that we have just put in. It's a form, it's a Google form. What we'd like for you to do is provide us with feedback on how the presentation was, whether or not you learned what you expected, and what additional questions or additional Zooms or education that we can provide for you based on the information we have. We know that when we have these Zooms that we are just opening up a can of worms. There's going to be a whole bunch of other questions after the fact. And we want that. We want the conversation. So with that being said, please just tell us, what do you want us to talk about next? What would you like to know more of? Where would you like to see us go? Where you would like for us to educate you through this process? We welcome that feedback. And we also welcome you contacting us after the fact and saying, hey, I have additional questions about, and we're here to help you. That's why we're doing this. So it is 4 minutes after 7. So in the interest of time, thank you so much. Our intention was for this to be an hour. We've gone a little bit over. We respect you. We appreciate you coming. If you have any more questions, you can put them in the chat. Feel free to reach out to all of us after the fact. And thank you again for spending some time with us. We hope that it was worth your time. Again, I'm Tisha Mitchell Curry. Olivia Smith is our state attorney, and Miss Gina McKnight, the owner of Graceful Living, is our gerontologist, and we are here to serve you in whatever capacity that you need. Thank you so much for joining us.